Now, members, if you would be good enough, please, to go over to file item number 6, which is the Delta Plan, and I think Mr. Grindstaff, I know Mr. Ray and Ms. Messer are going to take the lead on this. Do you want to kick off the
I do want to
discussion?
kick this off.
Okay.
First of all, I want to point out that we have 2 attachments here. One we call the Council Action Checklist. So these are significant issues that we wanted to bring back to the Council for decision.
And copies are outside.
And there are copies. Yeah. And the second thing that we have attached is the, what do we call it, the Council Consent List. And that's some 50-plus pages. And the intent is that we walk through all of the issues that are contentious, that need a decision or need more discussion by the council, and that we then adopt the consent calendar. When I spoke with the chair about this earlier, he suggested that we give council members at least until noon or so to make sure that there's anything that you want to pull from the consent list from those 50-plus pages. So if there are items that you want before we break for lunch, I think the chair will probably ask you which items you'd like to pull from the consent list, and we'll add them to the council items that we discuss before we get to the consent calendar.
Members, that is my suggestion in this packet, which I know all of you have gotten and is also publicly available. If there are items you know that you wish withdrawn from the list, all you have to do is let us know. I'll return at the end, right before we take a lunch break, and ask you this again. As we pull items off, they will go to the end of the council action checklist to be discussed and reviewed. I'm sorry, Ms. Gray?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of new information that is coming late. And there are some items I'd like to have pulled.
Okay.
That are not that significant. There's some that are on, so I can outline here.
Well, no, what we're going to ask you, if you know some now,
yes.
Just give us the item number.
Number 85.
Hold on.
P.
And we'll then identify it. So staff and members, it's item number 85, technical changes appearing on page 15 of this consent list. Technical clarification to the definition of significant impact. All right.
Number 179.
179. Hold on. Okay, members, 179 is at the bottom of page 33, and this is this is what we say. There's no regulation, not even a recommendation. It's how we describe the presence or absence of state regulation of groundwater. So that's pulled.
And item 275.
I'm sorry, 275.
Yes.
Which appears on. Hold on just a minute here. 52. Yeah, page 52, 275. Okay, nutrient discussion.
Right.
Okay.
There are some others that I could just give language change when we get to the consent
Well,
calendar. That's okay. Or you want all of them?
Well, if they're grammatical changes, I mean,
some context.
well, one suggestion: if the 3 that you've mentioned that we are pulling are the ones that you think are the basic policy discussion issues, then let's proceed with that. You might want to check with the staff, give them privately now a copy of the sections you're worried about just on grammar and drafting, and look at it. But we'll return right before lunch and ask you which of any of that list you'd want to pull.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay. Other items to be pulled by other members?
Mr. Chair, just on process here, I've got lots of notes. I didn't know we're going to start off the meeting and give us till noon to pull those off. I understood certainly we would have the ability to pull those off. I've got to go through and, I've got highlights and stuff in the margins here if that's what we're going to do here. And I do want to, before we get too far into this, get some understanding about where we may be on this tomorrow afternoon, recognizing obviously that this was discussed at the last meeting, but with the volume of material, and certainly, again, I know this has been a yeoman's job, all the staff and certainly the commenters as well, the assimilation of this. I guess I have kind of a process question too. Pulling off consent calendar to go to the council checklist, but if it's the intent, as I understand it, is to then act on these tomorrow with the final, I guess, red line being given over to the chair and vice chair, and certainly appreciate your willingness to take on that task. I'm just going to throw it out there. It seems to me, for as much time that has been invested in certainly the importance, and I don't know how long the consent calendar is going to get here as it moves over with suggestions to talk it on the council's checklist. I guess, Mr. Chair, I just want to, if it's appropriate, not now, but certainly sometime before we delve into this, whether there's some interest on behalf of the council to, once we've concluded with our work over the next 2 days, to actually see that final version back, because some of these may be word changes that we're all comfortable with, but we get some significant policy issues here. And I guess unless we're going to work through those, wordsmith them item by item, it would seem to me that, if we once had that before it gets circulated for final, I know that was going to be a task we're going to get to the chair and vice chair, but I want to put that out there because as I've thought through this a bit and certainly read through this volume of material, there's a lot here. I mean, there's a lot, and there's a lot left to be done. I mean, staff has worked very hard over the last few days. I mean, again, this is not a slight on anybody, but to see what that's going to look like in its format before we send it off for environmental circulation, and that's basically going to be final format. I mean, we can tweak that a bit when it comes back, but so I want to put that out there, Mr. Chair. Again, it's not to throw us off base or anything, and again, I know people work very hard, but if we're going to delve into it, that's where we're going to be tomorrow afternoon on a vote. And that's going to be the final with your review. And
well, here, can I make a suggestion? No, can I make a suggestion to you? Take a look at file item 6A, attachment 3, which is the motion that staff is recommending that we make tomorrow. And you'll recognize a lot of this because it was anticipated at our last meeting, and I think there's some minor technical changes in the motion. This is not, and the staff is not proposing that we adopt the Delta plan.
I understand.
That is specifically what will not be done. But the staff is asking for the council to give them policy guidance on a host of issues which they have identified in their the council action checklist, which we approved. We agreed would be presented to us at this meeting. We agreed to that last meeting. In addition, we asked them to do the consent list, which is a composite of what the staff views of 300 plus largely minor technical editing changes. We've had 3 items removed by Ms. Gray, and you'll be able to make notes on removing. Those items will go on the council action checklist. We're going to walk through the checklist and get council direction. We will not adopt the Delta plan. We're directing the staff to modify the staff final draft in accordance with the actions we take so that can be then circulated for public comment, and the supplemental, I guess, Mr. Stevens, you call it a supplemental volume to the environmental impact report. I think that's right. The supplemental volume of the environmental impact report can go out for the mandatory 45-day review period, comment period. And so, Don, I'm open to suggestions. If your suggestion is we should delay it again or create a 7th staff or draft that will be reviewed before we circulate it, some of these issues, as Ms. Sondheim indicated to us in the court opinion, some of these are differences of opinion on policy. And because there are differences remaining, the council should take a position. But the notion that we should come back and change and modify, this is the 15th month of this process. We will wind up producing 7 volumes of this. The complaints that occurred on day 1 are remarkably similar to the complaints that will be made today. And if there's a brand new issue that has never been raised before, I haven't heard it yet. but maybe that's just me. So I just, for myself, we need to move this process along. We're already almost 7 months late from our statutory deadline, delaying it further to produce a new volume so people could write us many of the same comments of things they don't like or wanted added and so on does not seem to me to be necessary after all this time, but of course the council could make a different decision.
Mr. Chair, I said, and certainly I'm very respectful of that and certainly the work. I guess what I was getting to the point, I recognize this was not the final, but I mean this was going to be circulated for the environmental review. It will reflect any of the direction that's given by this council over the course of the next 2 days. And I guess before you send that forward, again, it would seem to me that this council, and I don't know, again, maybe it's a process that's different when it comes to this plan than one that maybe I'm more accustomed to, is that to see that in writing, that's what's going to go out anyway, is to have the council now, if that's in their draft, it's, again, people certainly can comment on that, but it will reflect both policy direction, any of the editing that's done, but that would seem to me would be the appropriate course of action. It's not to delay it for months or put another draft out. I mean, it's going to reflect the changes that this council arrives at and any direction is given. But I guess I'd certainly like to see that in, because it's an iterative process. We're doing this as we go. People make good notes of that and keep and track that. But it seemed to me that the council ought to have that before them when you have the vote to send that forward for publication. And so that's not looking to delay or to put out another draft and all that, but it will be a draft that's ultimately reflective of this council's action. So,
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gray.
Yeah. I actually want to piggyback onto what Mr. Natoli said. I recognize the time frame that we're under, the stress or the pressure to get it done, but I think it's too important not to have the full council to see every change, because a grammatical change could reflect a difference in direction from this council. So I think it's important for all council members to see those changes. It doesn't mean that we have to have another meeting. I don't know if that's what that means. I don't know what the process can be. Can each council member receive those changes by email or whatever without coming back here at the dais? But I do think it's important for every council member to see everything that's in that plan. So, because from the public, we've heard the need for clarification, we've heard the need for verification, confirmation, all of those words to mean that there's still some issues out there in terms of knowing what we mean when it's written in the plan. I know staff has done a yeoman job with writing it. I know you guys have been under great stress trying to get things done, and I appreciate that. But I do think it's important for every single council member to see every single change in word, whatever in that plan before it's circulated as our document that the council has adopted. So I agree with Don. I'm not sure how that happens, but I think we have to do that.
Yes, Felicia.
Because now I'm confused by this. My perception of what is being recommended is not that we're adopting a plan at all today. In fact, one of the points I was going to make was that we're giving this level of direction. It's key that we're clear on things that are of a policy nature, because it's going to play into the recirculation of the environmental document. But call me a stickler for process. The whole point of doing environmental impact report is to actually listen to the comments that we get, and then presumably the council should be editing this document yet again before it goes final. And I don't see that on the schedule very clearly, and I was going to ask when we get to the motion that is made explicit in it, because even though I won't be here, my anticipation was that a lot of these are editing changes, and I think that Gloria's right. Sometimes a word makes a difference, but we would be able to catch that before we went to the final version down the road, and that this whole process was to be able to give enough input to the staff that they could do the next round of editing on the language of the document, with hopefully the chair and vice chair being able to catch whether something rises to the level of significance or not. Now, they may not get it all right, but presumably the council members will be able to catch it by the time we get to those next
Yeah,
drafts.
can I just make
That's
a-
how I was looking at what we were doing
Would-
today, not that it was, we
I
were
think
taking
you
a
ought
vote
to-
on the plan.
I think you ought to read the proposed staff motion, particularly subsection C, motion on next steps, because that explains very clearly. They're proposing that we direct the staff to revise the staff draft per our instructions, including action on the checklist, action on the consent calendar, and prepare a new draft. In preparing the new draft, staff's authorized to use its discretion in making additional conforming changes for purposes of clarity and harmonization, as long as they are not inconsistent with council direction. The new draft will be referred to as the final draft. Point 2, as soon as practical thereafter, present the final draft plan in red line and clean copy to the chair and vice chair for review and approval regarding consistency. After approving that, publish on the website for public examination the red line and the clean copy. Then prepare and have a 45-day comment period for the programmatic environmental impact report. Then prepare and submit to the Office of Administrative Law a notion of proposed rulemaking, and then schedule a council meeting for certification of the final EIR and adoption of the Delta Plan, and identify the process for completion of the state rulemaking. I mean, that's what they're recommending we do. If you want to do something on top of that, tell me what it is.
I wanted to confirm what Ms. Marcus said, Mr. Chair, that in fact the process, as the key things for us today in order to move forward with the environmental process are the policies and recommendations, and all of the textual changes will be made, and my expectation is that upon completion of the environmental review process, all of this comes back and changes to the policies and recommendations. It's true. I think there we will have I hope it's minor changes. If they're significant, we'll see if the environmental document covers it. The text, my expectation is that the council will then make decisions and go through the process yet again and adopt a final plan. Our hope is to do that by November or December of this year. And there will be a lot of opportunities for comments, and hopefully providing this next draft would give everybody that chance to look at every word change. And that's one of the reasons, as hard as it is, I mean, as you see, it's actually 60 plus pages of changes. Our red line version is going to be incredibly difficult, as our consultants have told us, but it's one of the reasons for doing a thorough red line version at this time, instead of just redlining the policies and recommendations, which we've done before.
Right, and there'll be more changes than this.
There will be.
I gave you a boatload after
Yes,
this. So
there will be.
that are narrative changes, not substance.
But I'd like to see those. You know, you made some good suggestions.
But you will see them before you vote on them.
But before we vote on them in November, but when we put the red line form out, again, I'm very appreciative of your comments. It seemed to me that we're going to send it out for circulation, because basically the council is owning this at that point in time, even though it's a final draft. I would think the council will want to see what it is that's going out, whether it was my comments, your comments, Felicia, or anybody else's. I don't know. I'm a little. I appreciate the urgency in which people are trying to move on this, but it just seems to me that red line and clean copy form ought to be something that the council looks at before it gets circulated.
Well, look, I'll just make an observation. The fifth staff draft Delta Plan has been on the street for 45 days. That follows all the 5 other versions of the Delta Plan, which have been out there for 15 months, maybe 16 months now. Make what motion you want. If the motion is to essentially delay the process, or to reject the staff motion on review, and not to review the council checklist or anything else, If that's what you want to do, not have this meeting, now that's one, tell me what it is.
Well, Phil, I wasn't suggesting that. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not being absurd about this. I wanted to ask the question as we went into this. We can work down through it. I just was suggesting that after we've done that be reflected in a format that the council would see. Before it hit the streets.
If you want to make a motion that would require the council to review and approve the drafting changes in a different fashion from what was suggested at the last meeting or the staff motion, that's the way to do it. I'm just change it.
Phil, can I ask?
Randy?
a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh. A couple of questions. After today, we give direction to staff. Is that still a staff draft, or
No.
It
It becomes the final version of the Delta plan, but it is an unadopted Delta plan.
It's a draft.
You
Well-
must have a vote of the council to formally adopt, and we are not doing that today
Yeah.
or tomorrow.
But I think what Don is asking, and certainly I'm agreeing to, is that I think every council member needs to see whatever new language, red line, whatever direction that we give today that comes out of the next 2 days. My question to the attorney is, can each council member receive that information rather than just the chair and co-chair without violation of the Brown Act?
Yeah, the Bagley-Keene Act, that's a great question. I would say dealing with the magnitude of what we're talking about, I would highly recommend that not be the course of action that the council take. So I think the issue comes down to, and just to cut to the chase here, what Don's talking about is perhaps a change to 2A of the motion here under C, next step. So rather than just going to a two-member committee of the chair and the vice chair, that the new draft actually come back to the council. But before that, I was hoping that maybe our staff could give a bit of perspective on, whether or not that's the direction of the council is not for us to decide, but a perspective on the logistics, just the logistics of what that would mean for our schedule and what we're trying to do in the long term, because I think it's important to have all the facts before you
Okay, Mr.
make that
Fiorini.
decision.
Yeah, two issues that I'm hearing. One, Don has raised a good point. If there is information coming in that is going to influence the narrative in whatever form beyond the point in which we complete our meeting tomorrow, it will be an unknown, and it will not have been public. And so I agree, even though it means a lot of work for myself and the chair, I agree that a subset of the council should be assigned to review everything and work with staff to help prepare the next version. But I think we're going to need another meeting. I think we're going to need a meeting probably the second week in July to give the full council an opportunity to benefit from all the work that staff has done with direction from, if it is ultimately the chair and the vice chair who you appoint to assist, bring that back so that everything is clear and public about whatever changes have been made. Then I think since we're talking about the proposed three-part motion, to Felicia's point, there's a missing step, and that is that after the environmental review period has ended, it's incumbent upon this council to consider public comment. And so, therefore, it should be spelled out that at the meeting following the completion of the environmental period and after having had time for staff review and recommendations, the council needs to review that before we submit it on to the Office of Administrative Law and proposed rulemaking. Correct?
Well, on that point, I think what we were trying to do, and I don't know if this is how we'll end up, we were trying to run the processes concurrently. So what we were trying to do is pull out what we call the proposed regulations, which will be the policies out of the plan, and some of the definitions, some of the administrative exemptions, turn those into a regulatory package. But the 45-day comment period for that would run concurrently with the 45-day comment period that we're proposing on the recirculation of the CEQA. But I think your point is accurate that we haven't laid out all the steps in the motion, and Felicia's is similarly accurate. I think the suggestion was that we jumping from D to E to get technical and what the motion was just to pick a date out there so people knew when it was anticipated that you guys would certify the final EIR and adopt the plan, because that's the kind of questions that we're getting. When is the plan going to be adopted? But you're absolutely right. The processes are meant to elicit comments. You will make more changes based on those comments. So you're not adopting any plan, you're not adopting the regulations, you're not adopting the policies. What the staff is asking here is to move the process forward so we can complete the review processes that state law says that we have to do, the CEQA process and the rulemaking process. We're going to learn from those processes and we're going to adapt, and you're going to say, we need to make these changes before you adopt the whole plan. So
We just need to have that clarified in here because it's so important.
Oh, I agree. So we can clarify that. But with regard to the extra meeting, I think what I was suggesting, without trying to hint as to whether or not I think that's a good idea, because that doesn't matter, but it's just the logistics for how fast the staff can turn around a red line, a new version. I mean, obviously we haven't even delved into the meat of this meeting, but then with the expectation of having another council meeting. So I think it's important before you decide on that we, if we can, inform you as to how that's going to work and what the timing is. Because if it's really unrealistic, you should know that.
Yeah.
Good.
I wanted to concur with what Randy said and Chris in terms of another meeting, because even today when we look at these very significant issues, and certainly there's one in particular that I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion, as well as others, there may be a need for another meeting. So I think having another meeting could capture all of this. We can discuss, finalize thoughts from the council and stakeholders, some of the information we received today, because some of the information we just received recently, and Joe knows this, and Martha, and we really haven't had a chance to digest it that well. So I think having another meeting allows the council to look at whatever was given direction from these 2 days, and also whatever is kind of left over from some discussion that may need to be looked at more clearly. So I do think there should be some change in the motion. I know we're not at that point on the agenda, but I would recommend that when we get there. Thank you.
Don?
No, well, I think as Chris has suggested, I appreciate the comments. And again, I'm not trying to stymie the process here, but I think, again, if the turnaround is going to be very difficult for a 2-week turnaround, then it may have to be, the latter part of July. But I'm certainly, I think we're heading in the right direction with that. And it goes certainly to my concerns, Mr. Chair. It wasn't, again, to frustrate the process as much as I think to continue, as Mr. Feverini said, to make sure that all the comments that are received are incorporated in something that for the public to review, prior to whatever motion we take to then send this off for its circulation and comment period for the final draft for circulation. So I think the conversation here is heading in the right direction.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Mr. Grindstaff, you lateraling to Mr. Ray, Ms. Messer,
I am.
Ms. Pearson, Ms. Davis?
I will hand it off
Mr. Ray,
to
you're going to
Mr.
lead
Ray
off
and-
here?
Yeah, sure.
Well, would you like to start off, Jessica?
No, I'm fine. No, I was just trying to. I'm still trying to react to
Okay.
the
Well, let me.
prior conversation, but that's fine.
Yeah, maybe I should enhance the discussion there. Getting this all done, even in a month, is going to be an incredible challenge for staff because, as you can see, we have a huge number of comments, a huge number of issues to work through. And for those stakeholders who've focused on 2, 3, even 5 or 10 issues, for us, we have to go through hundreds of issues and actually figure out what is the right language there. And it's not a simple process to get that all done in the timeline that's necessary, and then to produce a document that everybody can review and have at a public meeting. This is a challenging thing to get done, and if we end up wordsmithing the entire 500 pages, I'm not sure that we will get done. That's why I try and focus us on the policies and recommendations, which in fact are the heart of the plan, and something that have changed. But I think we're down to the nub of what there are a few key remaining issues, and I'm hopeful that in the next 2 days we'll actually get exact words for those things, so that there won't be any ambiguity about what the policies and recommendations coming out of this meeting are. So, and maybe at the end of the 2 days, everybody will see, oh, okay, we have covered the key issues.
Mr. Ray.
Yeah, I think with that,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say to Joe and Martha and the rest of the staff that I know that you have all worked very hard, extremely hard. I know it's a very difficult task, but I think we have come a long way. And when I say we, staff and council, but mostly staff in creating and writing and listening to us. But and that has been great. And I've heard from key stakeholders, the ones who have a difference of opinion in terms of perspectives, that Joe and Martha and all of the staff have been very good in meeting with them, listening to them, trying to understand their perspective. And when the first draft came out, I think you probably got a lot of pushback, at least 50%. But now I think we're probably 90%. We're very close. And I think that should be attributed to all of your hard work and what you've done. And so I just want to say that you've done a yeoman's job. This is a very important plan. We all know that. And we don't want to rush it through. It's too important. But we do understand deadlines. But the chair has done a good job leading the council. And the council has been engaged. And I don't want the perception out there that the council has not been engaged. All council members have been engaged. And certainly this is a plan that I would like to see it as a collaborative effort with key stakeholders, staff, and council. So I just want to say that to you this morning. We're almost towards the end, but keep the faith. And there's still a few issues that we have to work through, but we do appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you.
Mr. Ray.
but with that said, we do have a series of major issues we wanted to review with you, and these are laid out in attachment 1 to the staff report. And their responses to proposals made by council members, or at the last meeting, direction we received that we thought we wanted to bring back and confirm that we resolved issues in the way you wanted us to, or their responses to stakeholder comments that we received either in writing or at the last hearing that we thought required direction from the council. And the first of those has to do with the administrative exemption that would be provided in Chapter 2 of the plan. This is the governance section of the plan. You'll recall that one of the things that we're doing in Chapter 2 is trying to identify actions that we think are unlikely to have a significant effect on the co-equal goals, and so would not rise to the level of required consistency certifications. One of those is temporary transfers of water, and how that's handled has been a matter of some comment from stakeholders. I'll let Martha go through the details of the proposal. That's item number 1 in the spreadsheet.
Thank you, Jan.
Also, I thought I saw the new Deputy Director of the Department of Water Resources walk in, and I don't see her now. And she has a schedule conflict, and at a very early point, and Mr. Ray, if you would coordinate with her, it had been requested that she be allowed to give overview comments for the plan to get her schedule. I don't know where she went.
She just stepped outside the door,
Oh, okay.
so I can see her out there.
Okay. Pardon? Well, hello again. Things have happened since last week.
Please come sit right here.
Members, in case you have not known, the governor made a confirmation of an appointment. Was it last? It was last week, wasn't it?
It was Monday of this week.
Of this week.
Yeah.
And you are all of a sudden magically the deputy director of the Department of Water Resources, which is
Chief
just terrific.
Deputy Director.
Chief Deputy Director.
Yep.
That is just terrific.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so I would like to speak this morning for just a couple minutes, and then if you have any questions, you can ask me. I'll try to answer. I've just come off of 5 days of vacation, so I might be a little rusty, but I'll do what I can. So my comments this morning are basically just to provide support to the Delta plan, and I want to just provide some comments. They're fairly general, but I want to show that the department, in fact, does support the plan. We probably still do have some differences, but the staff at the council has been very responsive and very helpful and very knowledgeable in helping us to try to work through many of the issues. And I think we're all on very similar pages. We may not agree totally on everything that the plan has, but I think it's a really good document that can help us get to the place where we need to be to start working on getting other agencies and stakeholders in a similar place as we move forward to try to implement the plan as drafted before you with changes that we've submitted and others as well. You do know that we submitted comments, general comments, I think on June 13th, and then more specific comments were sent to Joe on the 20th, and we had a little bit of clarification that we dealt with shortly thereafter, but I think we're on the same page now. We also think the draft plan, the staff draft plan, provides a good basis for a workable framework for the Delta Stewardship Council to work with entities proposing and opposing certifications of consistency of the covered actions. We spent a lot of time, I think, talking about that at the last meeting. The ultimate success of the plan will depend on how the council actually implements it. DWR expects that the council will work closely with other agencies that have extensive knowledge and expertise with regard to the Delta in ways that we hope avoids duplicative regulatory actions and identifies areas where more action, whether regulatory, informational, or other, is desirable. We anticipate the council taking a leadership role in bringing together all of the different interests and facilitating continued interaction and alignment of those interests, leading to a much more comprehensive planning and project implementation in a way that advances the multiple goals and objectives of the Delta Reform Act. I think that's pretty critical. Finally, the department looks forward to working with the council staff and the council and other stakeholders on all of the important decisions that face the council as it moves forward to achieve the co-equal goals, providing a more reliable water supply for the state, as well as protecting, restoring, and enhancing the environment of the Delta itself. Through the Delta ecosystem, through practices that encourage, I'll read you a few bullets that we included. Greater water supply reliability, reduce reliance on the Delta, support for viable populations of aquatic and terrestrial species, better measurements of water use, water conservation and integrated regional water management planning, improve flood protection and priorities for state investments in the Delta, and finally, preserving the Delta as a place that supports agriculture and recreational activities that build on the historic nature of the Delta. So those are my remarks supporting the plan, and we look forward to working with all of the council members as well as the staff on implementation very soon.
Council members, questions? Randy.
Dale, thank you for coming. I'm glad you came back because 2 weeks ago there was an interchange that occurred between you and the chair and some of the council members that left the impression, and I'm speaking specifically now regarding to water transfers. Let me back up. We've got a policy, WRP1, that deals with potential future water transfers, and then sort of accompanying that are a couple of recommendations that occur at the end of our Chapter 3, WRR 17 and 18, I believe, that talk about reporting that's done mostly by DWR. That is the context. During the conversation 2 weeks ago, the impression was left that when DWR oversees a water transfer, that the recipient agency will state that they are employing best management practices and using water use efficient methods, but that is not, there's no follow-up, there's no checking, it's just simply accepted based on the reporting that they provide. And I believe that's probably the way it works. The legislature in the Delta Reform Act has emphasized the need for water management plans for each individual urban agency and now for each ag agency. Those are new requirements. And along with that, have reiterated the need for DWR to report on the progress being made. I don't remember the exact terms, but this is a long wind-up to my question. Ultimately, this council is going to monitor progress on water use efficiency, conservation, and all these other practices that are included in water management plans to confirm that it's leading to a reduced dependence on the Delta and a greater regional reliance. Talk to us about the kinds of, and I know this isn't your particular area, but so give you some grace on that front. But talk to us in general about the kinds of reports that are going to be coming out of DWR in relation to the Delta Reform Act, and then I want to react to that because I think that within our policies, they're to equip the council to better monitor progress. We're probably going to need a greater level of detail than what DWR is currently prepared to provide. And I want to have that conversation about how we can get to a reporting level that is meaningful to this council to oversee and monitor the progress being made.
Okay, well, let me see what I can do. I've got some information that I think will be helpful, and if I need to come back with additional information or provide you something off public line, I'm happy to do that as well. So you probably know that just this past month, in June, I think, June 10th, there was a report released by the department, and it was part one, and I'll explain the difference between part one and part two, to the legislature that actually reported on the, I'll call it the success of the reporting by the urban water agencies on their water management plans. And originally, the due date for providing those plans to the department, and the department spending has up to a year to review those plans to make sure that they have the basic components and best management practices included in their plans. Again, we don't go out and identify, who's doing what and who's doing what they said they would do. But these are basically the water agencies come to us and tell us this is what they plan on doing. So they had until, I think, the end of last year, December of last year, to produce those plans for us and for DWR to review those. We then, just before that, instituted a methodology that we allowed the water agencies to conform with, and so then we extended that time period by which they could then produce those urban management water plans, urban water management plans to us. So part one of the report that was just prepared and I think released on June 10th had 380 of those plans that were reviewed by DWR out of, I think our estimate is about 450 water agencies. So rather than waiting until all of them complied, we felt that the legislature probably wanted to see how well the agencies were complying. So again, those are just the agencies providing to us their plans that contain, we hope, all of these, the BMPs and the methodologies that are requiring or suggesting that they abide by. So we're lacking, about 170 or so of those, no, not less than that, 70 plans or so that we expect to have, hopefully, soon. But essentially, those water agencies, if you will, are out of compliance. Now, the one way that we do we use a carrot, maybe not a stick, but a carrot to get folks to comply with these, the rules and regulations. Again, this is to show that they are trying to achieve their 20% reduction by 2020. So one carrot that we use is that the department does administer a loan and grant program for water management, water agency activities, a whole host of actions and activities that they can apply for funding for, but they have to have a plan on file that's been approved. So that's the carrot. Now, if they want to go out and do things on their own, get their own money to do those things, we don't stop them. We hope that they're working to achieve that 20 by 20% reduction. But again, we don't have the staff, we don't have the time, we don't have the mandate to actually require them to do that very thing. So that's sort of a reporting, well, it is, it's a reporting. And then my understanding is that they're required to report back to us every 5 years on their progress, what they've done, how they've done it, but not a quantification. We don't ask for them to tell us, what exactly, how much water did they save by instituting or implementing some of these best management practices. It's not a quantification per se. So that's the reporting relationship. Now, could we do a better job? Could we ask for additional information? We probably could if we had the legislative requirement to do so. We don't have the staff. We don't have the resources to actually go in and check, each different water agency. Is that a potential? Sure. If there was funding and legislation that required us to do that, and then the funding and resources to go along with that, that could happen. So that's one way to take care of ensuring that those things actually do happen.
Okay, that's on the
urban side, correct.
On the ag side, the Ag Water Management Council was formed several years ago and has been acting on a voluntary basis, or acting with districts who have participated voluntarily. That became mandatory, and so I presume that the same process will be employed. I think the reporting requirements for ag begin in 2013, followed by 2016, and then 2019 or 2020.
Right. I think that's the schedule, too. I don't have all of the specific dates. But it doesn't go quite as far as the urban water management plans. Right now, we do not have a legislative mandate, if you will, a requirement to require the ag users to abide by a specific methodology. So that would be another area where if there was legislation or something that the council might support that did something similar to the urban water agencies in developing this methodology so that all of the ag water users are using the same formulas, the same calculations in order to come up with this information. And similar to the urban water users, there is no requirement now for a specific target, a specific number that they're trying to achieve. So again, I'm not suggesting that's where we go, but the methodology prospect is something that I think we would definitely support. I think that would be helpful.
One more question then. Understanding then how the reporting operation works for urban and ag, looking forward, this council is going to want to be able to monitor progress being made on water use efficiency. It seems to me that the reporting that's in place, the process that's in place, is where we need to go to get that information. And it doesn't seem to me that it will yield adequate information for us to effectively evaluate whether agencies are, as I understand the legislation, they're not only to develop a water management plan, but they're to identify within that certain actions that they have determined are cost-effective and feasible in that local area, and then implement them. And what I'm concerned about is that somebody needs to be reporting regularly on what are those feasible and cost-effective measures, and have they been implemented? Could that be added to the reporting process? And if so, what would your department require to make that happen? Is that legislative? Is that a recommendation from the council? How do we make that happen?
Well, I agree with you. I think that's exactly what we need in order to be able to identify those agencies that have more potential, that either they've reached targets that we think were really doable and could go further, if that's possible. I think in some cases it is. Again, we don't have the the regulatory mandate to do that, nor the resources. I think certainly a recommendation from the council would be really helpful, but I think it's got to go farther than that. I think just the recommendation probably isn't going to get really where we need to be. So maybe we're talking about legislation to make those requirements, maybe an amendment to the regulations that put in place the methodology parts of the urban water management planning as well as the urban water management planning. Or, sorry, the ag.
Yeah, I agree with Randy's queries, but I'll tell you what would be helpful to me. If you could give us a list of what you do not do and in your judgment are not authorized to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, DWR is a big, complicated agency with a lot of responsibilities, and so, you know, and all your engineers have checklists all the time. I've never met an engineer that didn't have 100 checklists somewhere. There must be a checklist of how you monitor activities, for example, on construction projects. It would be useful to say, as you've said here several times, we do not have legislative authority to independent evaluate and determine consistency, conformity, compliance, whatever the words actually are. We do not have a funding source for that activity. We have no way to verify the information submitted is true or false. Now, I frankly think that the odds are probably pretty high that the information in the water management plans are pretty good. And I liken it to the controller's report for state and local agencies that have been going on for 25 years, where we've actually had independent reviews that showed those reports, which have been submitted in detail, are accurate within a range of 95% plus. But those reports also are very clear, specific. They do go out and measure how much water they save or things like that, because that's the only way that the controller can review the process. And so I think, as Randy indicated, we're kind of headed toward at least a recommendation, but it ought to be a clear recommendation so that it's not just another exhortation, go do good.
Sure, I would agree.
And although part of me says just tell the legislature to tell you to, you know, to do all of this within your existing authority isn't probably enough, because this is complicated and likely to be in pieces controversial. But it's one of the keys to achieving co-equal goals and moving this water puzzle forward in California, and that's to encourage everybody to do good things and to report them and to achieve them and use their best good faith efforts to do it. Just a question I had on the loan grant program. You said that's the only area where you have at least some limited authority. That is, you have to approve a plan, I think this is what you said, before the money can be given to the applicant.
They have to actually have a plan that's been approved by DWR.
And what does it mean to approve a plan?
Well, I think that what our staff does...
In the loan grant context.
Oh, in the loan and grant complex. Well,
because what I'm...
There's
what
a checklist.
Yeah,
I don't have it with me, though.
Well, but you see, what
Sorry.
I'm looking for is a subset of areas where you're doing a more careful review, you're validating to your own satisfaction that the plans are reasonably proposed, are likely to achieve success, and you have some way to measure all of that. And I thought it just caught my attention, if there's a small loan grant pot of money where you use this process, can that process be expanded? Because many of the users are at least familiar with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, my understanding is when we approve, I'll use quotes around that word, when we approve an urban water management plan, there's probably a checklist that staff goes through and identifies all the things that the plan should have in it, and includes all the BMPs, the existing BMPs that are doable, that are achievable. And
it was either late 2010 or 2011. We had folks over to talk to us at a couple council meetings on this, and they said they did determine whether the subject areas were mentioned in the plan, but they did not determine that they were adequately discussed or that the actions proposed might have a beneficial impact on achieving. They said very much what you said is, sure, we do the pro form checking because that's what we've been told to do,
Sure.
but not much more. I think this is Randy's point, we're going to have to move beyond that in some fashion, practical, to understand whether we can.
I don't disagree.
So a list of things you think you do not have the authority to do now would be very helpful to look
Okay.
at.
We can get that for you.
Okay.
No problem.
That'd be great. Don? Other questions? Madam Chief Deputy Director, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Is this your last vacation for the next 2 years?
Heck no, I'm going to Australia in about 2 weeks.
Whoa.
That was part of the deal.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know who's going to review the red line draft from DWR then.
Thank
Take
you.
your iPod with you, Dave.
Mr. Ray.
Yeah, so we were about to begin discussing the way in which the administrative exemption for temporary water transfers is just proposed in Chapter 2 of the plan. And with that, I'll again turn it back over to Ms. Davis.
Thank you very much. By way of context, in the fifth version of the draft plan, which is listed here as option.
We're talking about Chapter 2, item number 1 on the matrix. Is that what we're talking about?
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. We had originally, in the fifth draft, recommended that temporary water transfers for up to 1 year in duration be exempted from our covered actions. And when we went back to justify that exemption, we referred to the CEQA equivalent process that is employed by the State Water Resources Control Board because there's a third-party review of the proposed transfers. And so it creates a context in which to base an assessment that somebody has looked at this and there's not a significant impact on the delta. Stakeholders came back to us and indicated that by using that language, post-1914 water rights would be covered, but pre-1914 water rights would not be. And so pre-1914 water rights under that language would then have to go through a covered action. And was that fair based on just the category of water rights being considered? So we talked with the stakeholders, we talked with the State Water Resources Control Board, we talked with the Department of Water Resources, had extensive meetings on this, trying to identify a way to craft for you a basis on which the council and the Delta Plan could make a judgment that a category, a class of actions would not likely have an adverse impact on the co-equal goals. And in addition to the CEQA exemption process that the State Water Resources Control Board oversees, when water is being transferred through the Delta, the majority of the transfers also have to receive approval from the entity through whose facilities they're using for the transfer. And so there's a Water Code Section 1810 that relates to Department of Water Resources approval of transfers that are going through their facilities. There's also an equivalent type of process for the Bureau of Reclamation under Public Law 102-575. So we revised the language to try and capture all of these decision-making processes, recognizing that there was an evaluation by a third party, certain findings were being made about no impacts on other water rights holders and others. And so that we felt that this was a very reasonable way to justify the exemption for water transfers. Now, in talking with the stakeholders further, they have indicated that, yes, this will cover 98% of potential transfers. There's still a very small subsection of potential transfers involving 1914 water rights that would not be covered because the proposed transfer, the entity that is proposing the transfer would be taking the water through their own facilities in the Delta, and so there's no third party that's making an assessment. And we tried to assess the likelihood that those would be of a size or a magnitude that would trigger a covered action. And our staff recommendation to you is that we think this is not likely to happen. And so we felt that the language that we are presenting to you in option 1 provides a legal architecture for the judgment call, and that the few transfers that might be caught would not be of significance that would get actually become a covered action. Did I say that okay, Chris? I'm turning now to our
Mr.
attorney to
Stevens.
make sure I've got this correct.
Martha is nails on this issue. I mean, she knows this, and she's worked with the stakeholders, so I defer to her on all the details. But if I could just take a quick step back on what administrative exemptions are and what their purpose is, because I think it ties into what we're trying to do here. And this issue is tough because it gets complex, like all the issues we deal with. So we'll take a step back. Administrative exemptions, it all deals with impact, significant impact. And so the council has under the Delta Reform Act, the ability to determine whether or not certain categories of actions aren't going to have a significant impact on the co-equal goals. And we can just say that in the plan. We're going to say they're not covered by provisions of the Delta plan, therefore they're not going to be covered actions. But it's based on significant impact. It's not necessarily based on whether or not they're good, they're bad. With regard to water transfers, we've heard arguments which I think are true, which I believe, in most cases they're good. We want to promote these things. But we also want to promote ecosystem projects. We want to promote a lot of things that are in the Delta plan that are good. So it's not the good argument. Is it going to have a significant impact on the co-equal goals or flood control? Let's focus in on that. So what we did is we took a certain category of projects, and some of them, we heard from stakeholders, they said, some of these categories are exempt from CEQA, okay, exempt from CEQA. Either the statute has determined that they're exempt, they're not going to have significant environmental impacts, or the Resources Agency through the CEQA guidelines has determined that they're categorically exempt, but they're CEQA exempt, and therefore, in most cases, they're not going to have a significant impact. And the council said, we see that argument, and so you've included those kinds of things as administrative exemptions. So we've tethered it to CEQA. They're not exactly equivalent, but in most cases, we tried to do that. With water transfers, when we looked at the same issue and said, okay, well, let's take one-year water transfers that are exempt from CEQA, as Martha correctly pointed out, we tried to do the same, but it didn't cover a whole category of water transfers that aren't exempt from CEQA. So then we went back and we said, okay, let's still focus in on significant impact. That's what we're worried about. We want to make sure that we have the justification to exempt categories of proposed projects from the definition of covered actions based on whether or not they have a significant impact. And that's where it gets a little more complicated, and the bodies of law that are out there right now with regard to water transfers, where independent agencies actually make findings with regard to those transfers as to their effects on injury to other water users, in-stream beneficial uses. And we said, okay, well, in those cases, when those agencies are making those kinds of findings, whether it's the State Water Board, DWR, when people are using the State Water Project conveyance facilities, or other public agencies' conveyance facilities, when they have to make those findings, we as the council, at least at the staff level, feel assured that there aren't going to have significant impacts to the co-equal goals. As Martha pointed out, then there's that category that some of the water users pointed out where we wouldn't be using, or the proposed activity wouldn't be using third-party conveyance facilities. There wouldn't be that independent finding with regard to beneficial uses and injurious to others and all that kind. But we don't know enough about that. Those projects are subject to CEQA. And so in those cases, we said, they may be covered actions, probably not, but we don't know. And that's why we came up with the language that we have. Now, keep in mind with regard to CEQA, if you're subject to CEQA, you can go through the CEQA process, identify the impacts to the environment, you try to mitigate and bring it down to an insignificant level, but you can always override. So CEQA is an informative process, but if there are important statewide economic concerns, for instance, there's a chance to override. So with CEQA, it's not a given that you just go through the process and identify the impacts and mitigation measures. You have that potential. So the way that we tried to craft it was to assure this body that there was a justification that there wouldn't be a significant impact. So.
Don?
Could you give a concrete example? Because there was a lot of comments and the letters that we received. I mean, there's been a lot of work on this. There were a lot of commentors, and I guess I'm curious about this 2% that you can't. Hearing Chris's and Martha's explanation, give me an example of someone that would be in a position of not knowing whether it would have an administrative exemption because of this uncertainty and the need to, at least from a staff perspective, to weigh this out. So,
one example would be Contra Costa Water District, if they were using their own facilities.
You get closer to your mic,
Mic
please.
close enough, sorry. Contra Costa Water District was one example that was given to me as a possibility. Stockton might be another one that would be a possibility. I think Antioch was a third. Those were the three examples that were given to me as possible if they were involved with the water transfer and they were using their own facilities, that they would not be exempted automatically under this policy.
And that's only for pre-1914.
Only for
Transfers, so
pre-1914.
for other
That is correct.
transfers.
So post-1914 water rights would all be, as a class, all go through the CEQA equivalency process within the State Water Resources Control Board.
And the issue, again, is that potentially it just wouldn't have an exemption from the definition of covered action. Doesn't mean it would be a covered action,
right,
but it wouldn't fall within that exemption.
But everything else is exempted. But those examples or things that are analogous to them are ones that are not. And why the pre-14 and post-14 distinction there?
Again, it comes down to the way California has adopted laws related to water transfers.
Okay.
So pre-1914, water that's transferred doesn't automatically go through the state board.
That is correct.
However, under the law, those transfers of water after 1914 do go through the state board. So that's why.
And one other question, so the fifth staff draft just said 1 year in duration and didn't specify, didn't get into a level of detail and succession of comments and back and forth and trying to, I guess, continue to whittle this down. So again, either Martha or Chris, from either perspective, legal or from a policy standpoint, why where we are today is better than where we were with the fifth staff draft relative to this 2% that seems to be the part we're hanging this whole thing on.
Well, I think what we were trying to do was make all the administrative exemptions consistent across the board with regard to the justification. So what we want to do is we want to have a solid justification that we've taken a look at the categories of projects and we've decided that for one reason or another, we don't think they're going to have a significant impact on the co-equal goals. And so it was kind of an evolutionary process with regard to the 1 year transfers. Again, without judging whether or not they're good in all cases or may not be at certain times of the year, I don't know. But again, it was a matter of conforming across all the administrative exemptions with regard to a justification. With regard to the water transfers in particular, the issue that staff had been directed to look at had to do with how they work with regard to pre and post 1914, and then to take a look at an issue that had been raised by some that was reflected in some recent court decisions. There was a perception that recurring transfers were somehow being abused, and again, staff wasn't trying to present an opinion or to prejudge the issue, but I think the direction that we got was to research the issue and figure out what the deal was and what the relevance was to the Delta Plan. And I'll give you a concrete example with regard to the relevance of the Delta Plan. And again, this isn't saying that there is there is an abuse of recurring transfers or serial transfers, but we have certain policies, and I understand that one of them we may actually discuss here later, WRP1. But in any event, it deals with proposed actions that could deal with water transfers. So hypothetically speaking, not that this would ever occur, but if there was a set of recurring transfers, and they could be, a pretty good amount of water, and there was an administrative exemption granted in the Delta plan for one-year water transfers, you wouldn't have jurisdiction. You wouldn't see any of those so-called recurring transfers. And so if WRP1, for example, is one of the fundamental, some say, linchpins of the Delta plan with regard to trying to achieve the co-equal goals, but focusing in on reduced reliance and regional self-reliance, and yet you had given an administrative exemption for something that turned out to be an abusive practice, again, not saying that that's the case, we wanted to make sure that you had all the information before you actually told us to go forward with that administrative exemption. So it was more a fact-finding, at least at the staff level, and we wanted, again, to make sure that all the administrative exemptions had the same basis with regard to the justification, and again, focused on significant impact.
Thank you.
Alicia? Okay.